Hello, and thank you so much for joining us again for another short reflection. The last time I shared with you, I was encouraging us to think about the question, what condition are you in? What condition am I in? And as we reflected on that, we saw the merit of inviting others to explore with us about our condition, or to use the language from last time, for others to look behind the bumper. Or to check the tyres with us. And of course, I think all of us see the wisdom in having good, godly friends, keeping us accountable and helping us to gauge how we are doing. But there's much that we can do ourselves. And I refer to it in my own spiritual journey as reading the gauges. And more specifically, reading the gauges in the car. Yeah, we're back to car talk. And when I think about the gauges, the first thing that comes to mind for me, it's not something that I want to see coming up on the dash, but it comes up anyway, and that's the car seatbelt light that flashes and pings at me. Because what I tend to do is I get into the car and then I'll reach for the sat nav and I'll put in the postcode for where I'm going or whatever. But while I'm doing that, the car lets me know that I haven't put my seatbelt on. So I quickly put it on. And if I'm honest, I find the ping a little bit irritating, but also a little comforting to know that it's there to remind me that my seatbelt helps me stay safe for the journey. And not just me, but for the ones that I love. So when I think about the safety seatbelt gauge, I think about boundaries. Boundaries are so critical. They're put there to keep us safe and to keep others safe. And can I encourage you to get this book if you've not seen it or read it before. This is an old book now. I bought it in 2002, so it's probably got a very different cover, and it's more likely than not to have been updated. But I think it should be required reading for everyone, not just us who are in leadership of one form or another. And in this book it says this: any confusion of responsibility and ownership in our lives is a problem of boundaries. Just as homeowners set physical property lines around their land, we need to set mental, physical, emotional and spiritual boundaries for our lives to help us distinguish what is our responsibility and what isn't. Boundaries are absolutely crucial for us. So can I ask you these questions? Do you know what your boundary lines are? When is the last time you reviewed those boundary lines? And are you accountable to others who know your agreed boundaries? Why am I spending time on this area? Because if we get blurry or casual with our boundary lines, it's like getting into the habit of going in the car on a journey without our seatbelts on. Sooner or later, there's going to be a crash, and all kinds of chaos is going to come from that. Not just ourselves, but sadly others who are impacted because of our carelessness or even our willfulness. A verse that comes to mind when I think about boundaries is found in Proverbs chapter 4. It says, above all else, guard your heart, for it is the wellspring of life. I've paraphrased that verse like this: be very careful who or what you allow behind your ribcage. So when you put your seatbelt on, can I encourage you to think about boundaries? The next two gauges that stare back at me from the dash are the Speedo and the Rev Counter. And when I think of the Speedo, I think of integrity. And you might be thinking, Dave, that's a fair stretch to think about integrity when you look at the Speedo. Why integrity? Because of little yellow boxes on the side of roads. Because of cameras on the top of bridges. You see, I find when I drive that those yellow boxes and those cameras on the top of bridges affect the way that I drive. I instinctively look at the Speedo. I lift my foot slightly out from the throttle when I see those cameras, irrespective of what speed I'm doing. I find that those yellow boxes and those cameras tell me that sometimes my behaviour is different when somebody's watching me. And so the question I want to ask is, who am I when no one is looking? In my quiet time I read, when it comes to choosing, make a habit of asking yourself, how will this choice affect my character, my sense of self-respect and my confidence when I approach God in prayer? How will it affect my influence and respect with other people? And most importantly, perhaps, how will it affect my family and those who are following in my footsteps? Who we are when no one else is looking is the most important who we are of all. We can be eloquent speakers, influential leaders, but God sees what we actually are. And who we are when no one else is looking is absolutely essential for us. So when you put on the seatbelts, let's think about boundaries. When you look at the Speedo, let's remember the importance of integrity in our lives. The last one I want us to just consider today, and there are so many that we could look at and that I use in my life actually. The next one is the Rev Counter. And when I think of the Rev Counter, I think of exhilaration, I think of excitement, I think of adventure. And if I'm honest, those are not the three words I would use to define how I've been feeling over this last year. Like the rest of you, it's just been an awful year in many, many ways. Yes, I can think of pinpricks of sunlight in the last year, but actually the overarching feeling has been one that is oppressive, difficult, dark. And I think we have to own that. And let's not pretend that actually everything is fine when it isn't. I had a very moving encounter this morning, just sharing with one of the pastors that I serve, and they were able to open about how life really is and how they would like it to be or want to project to others. It was deeply moving. But I think that when we give people permission to be vulnerable and to be honest, it is the birthing of real friendships. But also an incubator for good spiritual health. Let me read from a book that I'm reading at the minute, which is Renewing Your Spiritual Passion by Gordon MacDonald. And he talks about a journey that he had as a child, and he talks about it as the dark road because it was a journey that set off with much impetus and excitement, but as the day wore on and it turned into night and they'd got lost on many occasions, it became a real trial. And he says this: we were trying harder, working longer, breathing heavier, getting wearier. And it was all an unpleasant journey when it shouldn't have been. Other words that describe such a trip are sour, stale, bored, and numb. We would never have admitted it, but we were tired of God, of faith, and of faith's people. Now, how could a call to abundant living turn into such dullness of spirit? That we should tire of him was not God's fault. Rather, this weariness calls into question the system of spirituality many of us have been taught. He goes on to say, what compels me to write about the renewal of spiritual passion? I write because I sense out there in the real world of Western Christians that there is a growing weariness of spirit. We have tried the gimmicks, the programs, the promises of 1,001 gurus of the faith. Here and then, one view or another seems to catch on, but for many, the journey is a boresome task. And like my family on the dark road, we can't turn back, but we are almost too tired to go on. So what's the Rev Counter saying to you as you look at that? What's the Rev Counter saying to me? So important for us to be honest with ourselves. I'd like to close now with a prayer that I came across just recently. But before I do that, I just want to say again the importance of reading the gauges. I'd encourage you to think about some of the other gauges that you see staring back from you on the dash and seeing how you can apply them in terms of your spiritual formation. It'd be good to have fun with that later in the year when we're able to meet again. But my prayer for you and my prayer for myself is that we will be people who know what it is to make sure that we've got our seatbelt on, having clear and measurable boundaries, that we are people of integrity, and that we seek out times in our life where we have exhilaration, that we have healthy entertainment and laughter, and that we are people, even in these difficult times, who have balanced emotions because we continue to read the gauges. So here's that prayer. Each day, Lord, may I come to your well. May I draw upon your promises when all around seems uncertain. May I draw upon your strength when I feel weak. May I draw upon your comfort when I feel anxious. May I draw upon your guidance when I feel lost. And may I draw upon your spirit when mine is low. May I draw upon your love to share with others. Because there is nothing better than the water from your well to see me through each and every day. And God's people said, Amen.